Welcome back again to another video. If you are new in this channel, this is Queen Sharon Entertainment and home of freedom fighters. If you haven't joined our family yet, join us by hitting the red button down below on the bell notification icon, so whenever we have a new video in this same channel, you will get notified. Thank you so much for chilling in, and I love you all. So my people, I have a video here that I want you all to watch, and I myself will be watching with you in this particular video. Feel free to let me know what you think about the video after watching on the comment section below. Like and share this video, and I will see you again.
As we are extracting Buhari's government's rule of law mantra, and with us is the American constitutional lawyer and counsel to Nnamdi Kanu, Mr. Bruce Fain. It's a pleasure to welcome you on Sahara TV once again, Mr. Fain.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
You recently wrote an open letter to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Mr. Buhari. Some have described, some government critics have said you seem to have launched a scattering attack on the president and his famed rule of law mantra. Your reactions, please.
Well, it is an attack because there is a disregard of the rule of law in Nigeria. It's not something that an outsider is come upon. One of your very famous lawyers, Femi Falani, as late as 3 years ago, had accumulated 32 cases where the government had openly defied court orders. And indeed, the current Minister of Justice and Attorney General has openly stated to the Assembly of Nigeria that if he believes that a court order is contrary to what he believes the government needs, he'll just follow the government's needs and disregard the court order. That is the definition of lawlessness, that there is no tribunal that is above the political power of the executive branch. And to say it's just not academic, there are numerous cases, and I cite them, where the government did simply defy court orders, granting bails to defendant, refusing to account for property that had been looted by prior administrations like Sani Abacha, and there's no accountability, there are no sanctions. I have encountered it myself, where I have seen the court order saying Nnamdi Kanu is entitled to have visitation with 3 people, counsel of his choice. I've been present, and the DSS has said, no, you can't be there. Well, what's happened to the court order? And nothing happens to DSS, and I'm excluded, and Nnamdi Kanu is denied a right of access to his counsel of his choice, which is enshrined Article 36(6)(c) of the Nigerian Constitution. If everyone wants to look, this is not an import from the United States. This is in the Nigerian Constitution itself. That's being regularly flouted. And it's very, very frustrating. Just think of this on its face for someone who isn't even a lawyer. Nnamdi was detained last June. This is about 8 months ago. He hasn't had any trial. There's been no evidence submitted against him to substantiate anything, and yet he's been subsisting in cruel conditions in solitary confinement for 8 months. This is what's called, sentence first, verdict afterwards. It's Alice in Wonderland. How can you punish somebody you haven't even had a trial yet? And we're still struggling. When is the trial actually going to happen? They come up with 11th hour amendments to the charges that are so vague. Let me just give one example, I think, for the audience. One of the counts in the 15 amended charges says, well, sometime in a 3-year interval, we don't know when. Between 2018 and 2021, Nnamdi Kanu broadcast and he said, well, people should go kill the security services. Are there any victims? No. Are there any witnesses? No. Are the actual words used? No. And this is supposed to be something that was done by radio broadcast. You'd figure that they had listened to it and you could transcribe it. So you could say, these were the words you used. None of that is there. It makes you think you're just making this up. And you're saying you have to use a 3-year interval? You're guessing in a 3-year period that sometime this statement was made. Anyway, it is an example of how infinitely vague these charges are. So to defend them, it's like trying to, pound a nail into Jello. It's just very difficult since there's nothing there.
Now, before we go further into those charges, which some have actually described as trumped-up charges, you stated in that letter, addressing Buhari, that your lawless, malevolent mistreatment of Nnamdi Kanu is far worse than the degradation Nelson Mandela experienced experienced under South Africa's apartheid regime. It provoked international ostracism and exclusion from the United Nations. These were your words,
Yes.
quoted. Remember sometimes last year that the United Nations actually issued an urgent appeal to the Nigerian government as well as the Kenyan government, demanding stoppage against of any torture or violation of rights committed against Nnamdi Kanu. And they also warned seriously of consequences if the allegations of torture and violations of fundamental human rights were confirmed. You actually implied this in this letter, as a matter of fact. Has there been responses, communication received from Nigerian government to the United Nations? And if not, why hasn't the United Nations gone further than what, beyond just this urgent appeal and getting sanctions on this government?
No. There's no evidence at all that the Nigerian government has responded to any of these overtures. Let me give you one example. In October of 2020, 5 human rights experts from the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva wrote a letter to President Buhari. It laid out clearly why they were very dubious of the charges that IPOB was a terrorist organization, that Nnamdi Kanu was encouraging violence as opposed to peaceful, protected speech and assembly in order to advocate for secession. And the letter underscored, to advocate for self-determination is not terrorism, it's free speech. And this was this is in October of 2020. And the 5 experts asked within 60 days, said, President Buhari, please send us all the evidence you have that IPOB has engaged in any terrorist activity. We're eagerly waiting this because we think that you should reconsider your listing as a terrorist organization. It was procedurally irregular in the sense that it was a decision made solely by President Buhari. Under this Terrorism Prevention Act of 2013, if the president says you're a terrorist organization, that's it. Then the attorney general walks to a court and says, okay, they're a terrorist organization. There's no hearing, there's no evidence, there's nothing. It's just that he could wake up and declare you or me a terrorist. Okay, that's the end of the case. And they asked within 60 days, this is October of 2020, please provide us the evidence. Well, 60 days has elapsed, well more than 60 days. After a year, we're approaching 2 years, nothing, complete stonewall. And that has also been, I believe, the reaction to a proceeding with regard to arbitrary detentions in Geneva, where the foreign ministry has been asked to respond to a petition that I filed. Said, well, how do you respond to these allegations? Nigerian government, complete silence. Now, there is a principle in law that says if someone you could assume has exculpatory evidence, refuses to say anything, you can assume they don't have it, right? Because there isn't any reason why Nigeria would withhold evidence of Nnamdi Kanu's alleged guilt or terrorism if it was there. They know terrorism is international phobia, right? There's an easy way you can destroy your opponents if you have any evidence of it. So why would they have absolutely nothing and be silent on every single request that's been made ever since, even before the kidnapping and the torture and detention? So I believe that means that Nigeria has nothing. After all, they aren't wanting of resources. They walk into the court with 20 lawyers. They've got plenty of money that they obtain from oil. So it isn't that they don't have people to hire to come forth with this kind of evidence, and they still have complete zero. Think of this. We're now at the 8th month interval after the detention. With all of their so-called spies, DSS, they got plenty of DSS people, and you'd figure, why, with that huge armies of investigators, you should have all the evidence in the world, right? And they still have nothing. Complete nothing. I mean, they're down at this point. One of the last charges against Nnamdi Kanu, well, he imported a radio transmitter and called it used household goods. All right, so that's what you're claiming is terrorism, So the whole thing is a complete joke, and this is why it's appropriate. You have to attack something if it's attacked. Listen, I don't want to make this stuff up. I'd love Nigeria to have rule of law. That doesn't mean it's a perfect system. We in the U.S. make errors too, but at least you have separation of powers and you have judicial decisions that are honored, even if you disagree with them. In my view, the entire judicial decision-making process in Nigeria, demonstrated by the flouting of court orders every day, has been compromised in violation of the Nigerian constitution, which specifies that the courts are to be established that's in a way that secures their independence and impartiality. That's in the Constitution of Nigeria. Independence, impartiality, how can that be when their orders are flouted regularly and whenever the government says we don't like them? And the Attorney General openly acknowledges it. He doesn't even use euphemisms to describe it. He says, yeah, if I think that this court decision is wrong, I'll just do what I want. Okay, then why are we going to court? We should just go to Mr. Malami and ask you, since you're the real decision maker here.
So what's next for the United Nations with regards to this? The government can't continue to keep a mute silence or mute indifference as far as this is concerned.
Well, we need to recognize the United Nations and international relations. It's realpolitik. You know, governments, and UN is no different, don't act basically on altruism. And so there's going to be calculation. We do know that recently the president of Ivory Coast said that Biafra deserved independence. Ivory Coast supported Biafra during the first 67 to 70 civil war. Sometimes it takes a while for international pressure to accumulate. Look at how long Nelson Mandela had to struggle to dismantle apartheid. It wasn't something in a year or two. It was literally almost 40, 50 years. And we hope we don't have to wait that long in order for justice to come. But there are a whole lot of quirky things that can happen internationally that could cause, you know, Nigeria to be a pariah very quickly. And we just need to make certain that when that time comes, we're here not for vengeance. We're here other than we just want justice for everybody. This is not jumping on people's gravesite and getting elated because we can denigrate people. We want justice and the rule of law. We want everybody to win here. Right now, everybody's being a loser except a handful of people who are looting the government and are plundering the Biafrans.
Now, let's get your view on the 15-count amended charge against Nnamdi Kanu that was filed at the 11th hour. One begins to wonder, you actually made a statement in the letter saying that it's a legal embarrassment. From a legal point of view, what is your take on these 15-count charges against Nnamdi Kanu? You actually cited one example earlier. We want you to expatiate on this.
Well, what I think reveals the weakness of the case is there's a general requirement in law. In order to enable a defendant to defend, you have to have specificity with the charges. You killed X on such and such a date, you know, in these circumstances. And what infects all of the 15 charges is that they're written at a level of generality that you just can't, it's infinite generality. Something happened in the last 5 years. We don't know, did anybody who's named get harmed? Who did the violation? What were the words used to incite? None of that. It's just like somebody coming into your office and saying, you know, in the last 10 years, you know, you murdered somebody somewhere on the African continent, right? You say, well, you know, how do you defend against that? Because it's so vague. I mean, you don't even know where to begin. And that, I say, is characteristic of every single one of these 15-count charges, which makes you think they really have no clue what they're doing. And one of the other things that sticks out is that this is now the second time they've amended charges. They first started out with charges. Then they had a First Amendment charge. This is a Second Amendment charge. Now, after they file their charges, there's this affidavit submitted by the government saying the investigation is closed. We've completed investigating everything. Well, then how come you have amended charges? You just stated earlier that you had completed the investigation. How can you have new charges if you didn't continue an investigation? Because you didn't unearth any new evidence. So I say I wouldn't be at all surprised at the February 16th hearing that's currently scheduled, the government come up with new amended charges. Because they don't want to go to trial.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, considering the legal shenanigans of this government, which seems to be taking a more stringent approach towards not holding a trial for Nnamdi Kanu. Isn't this going to make his release even more elusive?
Well, yeah, I mean, their goal may be, and I'm speculating here, I'm not an expert on Nigerian politics. They may say, well, we'll hand off Nnamdi Kanu to our successors. We just got to kick the ball down the road till the 2023 presidential elections and then just decide, what happens. I don't think that they know exactly. This is a day-to-day operation here. I don't think that there's any clear strategy other than they know if they go to trial, they would lose. And therefore they don't want to have trials, so they have to make up excuses why they could continue to justify, his detention. Say that's simply lawlessness. I go back, Nelson Mandela. You read his memoir, read the biography. He lived in paradise compared to Nnamdi Kanu. He was able to take online courses. He talked with his he actually gave lessons to some of his guards. He had relationships. There were sporting events. He wasn't under the severe privation. Nnamdi Kanu is living in virtual inhumane conditions. He can stand up or lie down. He's got no reading materials. Unlike Nelson Mandela could take courses online. He doesn't have access, to counsel on a regular basis, including myself. No writing materials that enable him to develop and coordinate his defense. It really is itself a form of torture. Solitary confinement in many countries is viewed as a cruel and unusual punishment, which is what he's confronting. I mean, it's really a testament to his courage and endurance that he's been able to survive this long, and retain his composure and continue to insist, despite the injustice, on a peaceful path. We don't want violence except in self-defense. We all have a right to live, right? If somebody attacks you, you have a right to defend yourself. But other than that, he's insistent. We need to do this peaceful way, because otherwise the whole thing's going to go up in flames and we're all going to be losers.
You also mentioned the fact that Buhari disobeyed court injunctions regarding the human rights of an activist, Omoyele Sowore, to be precise, as well as the leader of the Nigeria Islamic movement, Ibrahim El-Zakzaky, amongst others. Yet Buhari's government still remains recalcitrant. Isn't it troubling?
Yes, it's very troubling. It's because, again, it goes, I mean, this is kind of in a joking fashion, but it's not said other than to underscore the point. I mean, when you go into court, you ask, well, let's put President Buhari on a speakerphone. He's the one who's going to decide ultimately whether whatever you issue is going to be obeyed. So let me make the argument to the person who's going to be deciding. The judges are just out there as the first line. They're like the people who give you entry into the boss's office where your real decisions are going to be made. And this is most unfortunate. You can't have a rule of law without independent judges. And I underscore, that doesn't mean judges get it right all the time. Sometimes they get it wrong, but they're independent. They don't have political agendas. The executive branch has political agendas. They want to stay in power. They want to get the new elections and things like that, which is why we entrust justice, that sensitive issue, the heartbeat of civilization, to independent judiciary. And that simply doesn't exist in Nigeria today.
You accused Mr. President of orchestrating the kidnapping, torture, extraordinary rendition, arbitrary detention, and unconscionable ongoing criminal prosecution of Nnamdi Kanu. You actually stated emphatically that Mr. President Buhari stand accused, and that the path forward is to order the immediate release of Nnamdi Kanu. Have there been any responses from Nigeria's government to this letter?
No, they have not responded. Although, several months ago, the Justice Minister, Malami, said, well, we're open to negotiations. We want to find a place. But it was just a joke, He's still the Stonewalls. Well, what's the presentation then? What's the venue? What's the form? Let's have, what are the agenda items? I think that's just made because it looks like, okay, it'll pacify the international community for a few minutes because they think we're sincere. But this is most unfortunate. It does seem to me, especially Nigeria, although there are other countries that suffer the same. We need to remember that the seeds of this upheaval were planted by the British because not a single African, certainly no one in Nigeria or ever historically was ever consulted on what the boundaries ought to be. Exactly. No one was ever asked, well, do we have the homogeneity of language, culture, ambitions, incentives, customs that make for a country, or do we need to have separate? Nobody was ever asked. This was pure boundaries drawn by the end of a bayonet, which is viewed as completely illegitimate, morally and under international law. Where's government by the consent of the government? There was none of that. So it was inevitable when 1960 comes and you have these very artificial, arbitrary boundaries there, including, ethnic groups who don't have, the commonality that's associated with nationhood. You're just ready. It's just like you have nitroglycerin there ready to blow up, which is what in fact happened in 1967. And even before then, there was rattling, if you would. And it's time to go back and rethink what is sacred about these boundaries. They're never drawn by a Nigerian. They're drawn by the British, by the end of by military force, by the Maxim gun. And so, okay, let's rethink. How can we make the system better for everybody here? I say we're not trying to deprive anybody. Their expectations. There can be transition periods if needed to adjust for economic dislocations with changed boundaries, but it ought to be on the table. And it's most unfortunate that there's just thought, oh, there was a boundary there 100 years ago by the British. It's sacred. Why is it sacred? Oh, the British, what did they have? They had nothing about Africa in mind when they drew those boundaries.
Now, finally, more than 8 months have elapsed since this illegal extraordinary rendition of Nnamdi Kanu from Kenya. Still yet, there has yet to be a trial. There's yet to be an opportunity for Nnamdi Kanu to actually confront his accusers. And you were at the last court sitting, and you were with the lawyers, the council there. Are there optimism as far as the February 16th appearance is concerned? And what's your message to the Southeasterners, especially the IPOB, members of IPOB?
The first thing is we need to be consistent with, Nnamdi Kanu, the rule of law. That's what we have to remember. As painful as it is, it's worse if we end up with anarchy. So I'm not here to try to foment, violence. The opposite. We need to stay faithful to that high principle. But when other people, we shouldn't be reluctant to say you're not following that principle. I don't know whether I would characterize, February 16th as being optimistic or not. It just is. Things happen in very surprising ways. Say even the last occasion, the amended charges came in, literally 24 hours before the hearing. So you can't have a hearing because now you have a new game, right? And who knows, maybe on February 16th, we have new amended charges. So I don't know that I'd characterize it one way or the other. It's just that we're trying as best as we can, to follow legal protocols for presenting arguments, trying to get a decision that's based upon independent judgment, having impartial, examination from international observers and lawyers who don't have any vested interest in the outcome. To try to make the resolution in a peaceful way that's best for everyone in Nigeria. We want everybody to be a winner here. And there's nothing wrong with going back to first principles and saying, well, really the boundaries were wrong from the beginning. Let's try to think how we can overcome that gross error, which didn't have any consultation with the people, and come up with a resolution, even if it's imperfect, that represents government by the consent of the governed.
Mr. Bruce Fain, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching that particular video. Feel free to let me know what you think about the video in the comment section below. Like and share this video, and I will see you again in my next one. Bye.